Thank God. This incredible HFY masterpiece found you today. Witness the legend, starting now.
Listen, I need to tell you something about humans, and trust me, this is coming from someone who learned the hard way. My name is Vorkuth, and I'm a Craxian enforcer. Well, I was an enforcer. Past 10, thanks to one particular human female in what I can only describe as the worst day of my 17 solar cycles. Let me set the scene for you. Galactic Academy Station 12, the most prestigious educational facility in 3 sectors. We're talking about a place where the elite offspring of 1,000 species come to learn advanced physics, quantum mechanics, and most importantly, how to maintain the delicate balance of intergalactic politics. Sounds fancy, right? Yeah, well, fancy doesn't mean civilized when you're dealing with hormonal alien teenagers who think they own the universe. I was big, even by Craxian standards. 8 feet tall, muscles that could bend titanium pipes, and scales harder than most ship hulls. My people were warrior class, feared across multiple systems. We had conquered 17 planets before joining the Galactic Coalition, and everyone knew it, everyone respected it, or at least they feared it enough to show respect. Which was basically the same thing in my book. The humans? They were new, fresh meat in the academy. Only been part of the coalition for maybe 50 of their Earth years, which was nothing compared to species like mine who'd been around for millennia. They were soft, pink, fragile little things that looked like they'd break if you sneezed on them too hard. We had a betting pool going about how long the first batch of human students would last. I gave them 3 weeks maximum before they tucked tail and ran back to their little blue marble of a planet. There were about 30 human students that semester, scattered across various programs. Most of them kept their heads down, tried not to make waves. Smart, self-preservation and all that. But then there was her. Dakota was in my advanced combat theory class, which was hilarious because what could a human possibly teach anyone about combat? She was maybe 5.5 feet tall, had this wild curly brown hair that seemed to have a mind of its own, and these sharp green eyes that never seemed intimidated by anything. She sat in the front row, always asked questions, always challenged the instructor when she thought something didn't make tactical sense. The audacity of this creature. Now I should mention that the academy had strict rules about interspecies conflicts. Touch another student with aggressive intent? Immediate expulsion. But there were, let's call them gray areas. Accidents happened. Equipment malfunctioned. Personal belongings got damaged during the crush of students moving between classes. You understand what I'm saying, right? I had my crew. Salthor, a Venusian with tentacles that could move faster than most species could see. Grix, a Plutonian whose crystallized body structure made him practically indestructible. And Kelmar, a centauri who could read surface thoughts if you weren't careful. We ran our section of the academy. Prime spots in the dining hall. Ours. Best training rooms. Ours. Front of the line for everything. You better believe it. The humans generally stayed out of our way, which was fine. Live and let live, as long as they remembered their place in the pecking order. But Dakota? She didn't seem to get the memo. She'd sit at whatever table had space, used equipment when she needed it regardless of who'd claimed it, and generally acted like she belonged there. Like she was equal to species who'd been traveling the stars while her people were still banging rocks together. It irritated me. More than it should have, probably. There was something about her complete lack of fear that got under my scales. Every other species showed appropriate deference to predator species. Even the Venusians, who were no pushovers themselves, maintained a healthy respect for physical superiority. But humans, Dakota specifically, nothing. Just this calm, steady presence that refused to acknowledge she was at the bottom of the food chain. The incident happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were combat simulation days, and I was already in a foul mood after losing a ranked match to Zalthor. Tentacles, man. Totally cheap advantage. We were moving between the combat dome and the next class when I saw Dakota head in the corridor, that ridiculous bag of hers slung over her shoulder. Now human bags were a joke among the other species. We used neural implants or data crystals for our learning materials. Everything you needed could fit in a device smaller than your smallest finger. But human, they carried these primitive fabric containers stuffed with actual paper books, writing implements, personal items, snacks. Dakota's bag was particularly offensive because it was covered in patches and pins from Earth, like she was advertising her planet's backwater status. Hey Vorkoth, Grix said, his crystalline voice tinkling with amusement. Check out the human's luggage. Think she's moving it? Zalthor's tentacles rippled with laughter. Probably carrying her entire planet's technological advancement in there. Shouldn't take much space. Kelmar just smiled his knowing smile. He'd probably picked up on my irritation and was waiting to see what I'd do about it. I should have walked away. Should have just let it go. But I was frustrated from the loss, annoyed by her constant presence in my peripheral vision, and frankly tired of humans acting like they belonged at the big kids' table. So I made a decision that would, quite literally, change my life. "Mills," I called out, my voice echoing off the corridor walls. She stopped, turned around, and just looked at me with those steady green eyes. No fear, no anxiety, just patient attention, like I was a teacher about to ask her a question instead of a predator species enforcer twice her size. "Your bag," I said, moving closer. "It's a safety hazard. Someone could trip." She glanced at the bag, then back at me. "It's on my shoulder, Vorkuth," not blocking anything. The way she said my name, so casual, like we were friends or equals, it made my blood boil hotter. Behind me I could feel my crew gathering, sensing entertainment. Other students were stopping too, forming that inevitable circle that appears whenever conflict brews. Everyone loves a show. "I disagree," I said, reaching for the bag. "I think it needs to be confiscated for everyone's safety." Quick sidebar here, remember those gray areas I mentioned? This was one of them. I wasn't technically touching her. Just her property. Totally within the rules if you squinted hard enough and ignored the obvious intent. Dakota pulled the bag away from my reach. "Don't touch my stuff." "Or what?" I leaned down, bringing my face closer to hers. My breath probably smelled like the Krellian meat strips I'd had for lunch. "What exactly are you going to do about it, human?" She held my gaze for a long moment, and I swear I saw something flash in those eyes. Something cold and calculating. But then she just sighed, like I was a minor inconvenience, and tried to walk around me. "Oh no, not happening. Not with everyone watching. Not after I'd committed to this course of action." I stepped into her path, and this time I did grab the bag, yanking it hard enough that the strap pulled tight against her shoulder. "Hey!" she shouted, pulling back. For a few seconds we played tug of war, her trying to keep her property and me determined to prove my point. The crowd was getting bigger now, students from multiple species watching the drama unfold. I could hear whispers, clicking, chirping in various languages. This was going to be legendary, the day Vorkuth put a human in her place. Then I pulled harder, putting real strength into it. The strap snapped like it was made of cobwebs. Dakota stumbled backward but caught herself quickly. That human balance thing, I guess. And me? I had her back. I held it up triumphantly, showed it to the crowd. My crew was laughing. Other students were making various sounds of approval or shock. Dakota just stood there, breathing hard, hands clenched at her sides. "Oops," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Defective Earth manufacturing. Tragic." That's when I made my second mistake. The first was grabbing the bag. The second was what I did next. I threw it down on the corridor floor hard, and then I stomped on it. Once, twice, 3 times. I heard things crunch inside. Probably those primitive electronic devices humans were so attached to, definitely some of those paper books. The fabric tore, contents spilling out. A water container cracked, liquid spreading across the floor. The crowd went silent. Even my crew stopped laughing. There's a difference between dominance displays and outright destruction of property. I'd definitely crossed a line, but I was committed now. Couldn't show weakness by backing down. I looked at Dakota, expecting tears maybe. Or anger. Or fear. Something that would confirm what I wanted to believe. That humans were soft, and breakable, and didn't belong here among superior species. What I got instead was that cold, calculating look again. But this time it didn't disappear. This time it stayed. Settled into her features like she'd made a decision. "Feel better?" she asked, her voice quiet but clear in the silent corridor. "Much," I said. "Maybe next time you'll remember your place." She nodded slowly, then knelt down and started gathering her ruined belongings. Books with torn pages, the shattered remains of her communication device, soggy papers. She moved methodically, carefully, placing everything back into the destroyed bag. The crowd started to disperse. Show was over. Nothing more to see. I turned to leave, feeling pretty satisfied with myself. Lesson taught, hierarchy maintained, reputation secured. My crew fell in behind me, already talking about where we'd eat lunch. Then I heard it. Footsteps behind me, moving fast. I started to turn, but I was way too slow. Dakota had taken the metal handle from her bag, the part that was supposed to be the reinforced structural element. Turns out human engineering, when it comes to making things durable, isn't actually that primitive. The handle was solid metal, curved, with enough weight to do serious damage if used correctly, and she definitely used it correctly. The first hit caught me across my right arm, right on the joint where my scales were naturally weaker for mobility. The impact was shocking not just because of the pain, which was immediate and intense, but because of the force behind it. This tiny human had swung that handle like a weapon, with technique and precision that spoke of training. I roared, more from surprise than pain initially, and tried to grab her with my other hand. But she was already moving, ducking under my reach with speed I didn't know humans possessed. The second hit came from a different angle, same target. My arm. That vulnerable joint. I heard the crack before I felt it. A deep, grinding sound of bone breaking. My bone, breaking. From a human. The pain hit a second later, white hot and all-consuming. I dropped to my knees, clutching my arm. The bone was definitely broken. Possibly in multiple places from the way it was already swelling and turning dark colors under my scales. Around me, the corridor erupted in chaos. Students were shouting, calling for security. Backing away from Dakota, who still held that metal handle, breathing hard, eyes locked on me. You broke my arm," I gasped. Shock overriding everything else. She dropped the handle. It clattered on the floor with a metallic ring that seemed unnaturally loud. Then she knelt down, bringing herself to my eye level since I was still on my knees, cradling my shattered arm. "Yeah," she said, her voice steady despite the heavy breathing. "I did. And you know what? You're right. I should remember my place." She leaned in closer and her voice dropped lower. "Meant just for me. My place is standing up to bullies regardless of what species they are. My place is showing that humans might be new to your galactic community, but we're not going to be anyone's punching bags. My place, Vorkoth, is right here, taking up space. And if you or anyone else has a problem with that, well," she glanced at my broken arm, then back at my face, "we can discuss it further." Security arrived then, 4 armed guards from different species, all wearing the Academy's enforcement uniforms. They took in the scene quickly. Me obviously injured. Dakota obviously the cause. The broken bag. The scattered belongings. The crowd of witnesses. "What happened here?" the lead guard demanded. 20 different students started talking at once. My crew immediately jumped to my defense, saying Dakota attacked me unprovoked. But other students, ones who'd seen the whole thing from the beginning, were telling a different story. A story about me grabbing her bag, destroying her property, humiliating her in front of everyone. The guard held up a hand for silence, then looked at the security footage. Yes, of course there were cameras everywhere. This was an advanced facility. I'd been so focused on the technical loophole of not touching her directly that I'd forgotten the cameras would show everything. My aggression, her restraint, my destruction of her property, her response. "Both of you, come with us," the guard said. Dakota went, quietly, calmly, like she'd expected this outcome. I stumbled after them, still clutching my arm, my entire worldview cracking as thoroughly as my bone. Because here's the thing about humans that none of us knew yet, that none of us were prepared for. They're not top of their food chain because they're the biggest or strongest or fastest. They're soft, yeah, fragile in a lot of ways. But inside they're made of something we didn't understand. They call it determination, stubbornness, maybe spite. Whatever it is, it means they don't back down just because someone's bigger than them. Evolution on Earth, I learned later, was brutal. Constant predators, harsh conditions, competition with other intelligent species that didn't make it. Humans survived not by being the toughest but by being the most stubborn, the most unwilling to quit, the most creative in how they fought back. And they have this concept called proportional response. You break their stuff, they break your arm. Eye for an eye, they call it. Fair's fair. At the medical center, while they were regenerating my bone, which hurt almost as much as breaking it, I had time to think about what had happened, about what it meant, about the fact that I, a Craxian enforcer from a warrior species, had been taken down by a 5'0" human with a bag handle. The Academy's Justice Board met 3 days later. They reviewed everything, heard from witnesses, examined the footage from multiple angles. Their verdict surprised exactly no one who knew humans, and shocked everyone who didn't. Property destruction for me. Suspended for 6 weeks. Mandatory anger management and interspecies sensitivity training, and permanent mark on my record. Dakota got self-defense justification. Her actions were deemed proportional response to threat and property destruction. She was cleared of all charges. The news spread through the Academy like wildfire. A human had broken a Craxian's arm and gotten away with it. More than that, she'd been officially vindicated. The power dynamic I'd spent 3 years establishing crumbled in the space of a single corridor incident. My crew distanced themselves pretty quickly after that. Turns out when your reputation is built on being the biggest predator, getting publicly beaten by the weakest species doesn't do wonders for your social standing. Zalthor found new friends. Grix acted like he barely knew me. Kaelmar at least had the decency to look guilty about abandoning me, but he did it anyway. I sat in my dorm room during my suspension, arm healing but ego thoroughly shattered, and I replayed that moment over and over. Not the fight itself, but before. When Dakota had looked at me with those calculating eyes and I'd dismissed it as nothing, when she'd tried to walk away and I'd stopped her, when I'd had multiple chances to just let it go and chose escalation instead, I thought I was teaching her a lesson about hierarchy and power. Turns out she was the one doing the teaching, and the lesson was pretty clear. Don't mistake quiet for weak. Don't assume small means powerless, and definitely, absolutely, never underestimate a human who's decided they've had enough of your nonsense. When I came back to the academy 6 weeks later, things were different. The humans walked with their heads higher. Other species gave them more space, more respect. And Dakota, she had a new bag, reinforced design, and she sat in the same front row seat in combat theory, asking the same challenging questions, taking up the same space. The difference was, now everyone knew exactly what it cost to try and take that space away from her. But here's where the story gets interesting, because my broken arm was just the beginning. What happened next? Well, that changed everything, not just for me, but for how the entire academy viewed human students. And it started with an investigation that nobody saw coming. So there I was, back at the academy after 6 weeks of what I can only describe as the most humiliating period of my life. My arm had healed perfectly, thanks to advanced regeneration therapy, but my prop, that was still in about 1,000 pieces, scattered across the corridor where Dakota had put me on my knee. The anger management classes were a joke. Some Andromedan therapist named Quilnox kept asking me to explore my feelings, to understand the root of my aggressive tendencies. Like it was complicated. I was raised in a warrior culture where strength meant everything and weakness meant death. Pretty straightforward, right? But apparently that wasn't the answer they wanted to hear. The interspecies sensitivity training was worse. They made us watch videos of different species, learn about their cultures, their values, their contributions to the coalition. When the human segment came on, I almost walked out, but my supervisor was watching. So I sat there and learned things I'd never bothered to know before. Turns out humans weren't just lucky primitives who stumbled into space travel. They'd gone from first flight to moon landing in like 60 years. They'd survived multiple world wars, planet-wide diseases, natural disasters that would have wiped out less stubborn species. They'd built their entire civilization on this weird concept of constant improvement, always pushing forward no matter what stood in their way. The video showed human history, and honestly, it was terrifying. These creatures fought everything. Their environment, each other, their own biology. They split atoms, mapped their own genetic code, sent machines to other planets before they could even leave their atmosphere themselves. They were relentless. One particular clip stuck with me. Some human general from one of their ancient wars, surrounded by enemies, outgunned and outmanned. Someone asked him if he was retreating. His response, "Retreat? Hell, we're just attacking in a different direction." That was the human mindset, in a nutshell. Never give up, just change tactics. I started to understand why Dakota hadn't backed down. It wasn't bravery or stupidity, it was just how humans were wired. They literally couldn't comprehend the idea of accepting a position they considered unfair regardless of who was enforcing it. When I returned to classes, the social landscape had shifted dramatically. The humans weren't just accepted anymore, they were respected. Other species actually wanted to partner with them for group projects, sit with them at meals, train with them in combat simulations, and it all traced back to that one incident. Dakota became something of a legend. The human who broke the Craxian, they called her. She didn't seem to enjoy the attention particularly. Still sat in her front row seat. Still asked her questions. Still carried her new bag, which I noticed had even more patches and pins than the old one. Like she was daring someone to try again. We didn't talk. I avoided her, she ignored me. Fine by both of us, I figured. Lesson learned. Hierarchy adjusted. Everyone moves on. That should have been the end of the story. Except the academy administration had other ideas. About 2 weeks after my return, I got summoned to the dean's office. Dean Valtaris was a Centaurian elder, one of the oldest beings at the academy, with enough political power to make entire planets nervous. You didn't get called to his office unless something serious was happening. I walked in expecting more punishment, maybe extended probation. What I found instead was Dakota sitting in one of the visitor chairs, looking just as confused as I felt. Borkoth. Dean Valtaris said. his multiple eyes focusing on me. "Please sit." I sat as far from Dakota as the furniture arrangement allowed. The dean settled into his chair, which adjusted automatically to his unusual body structure, and pulled up a holographic display between us. "I've called you both here regarding an investigation," he said without preamble. "It has come to our attention that the incident between you two was not isolated. We've been reviewing academy records, security footage, and student complaints going back 3 years. My stomach, all 3 chambers of it, dropped. Oh no." The holographic display started showing clips. Me and my crew blocking corridor access. Us taking food from smaller species in the dining hall. Incidents in training rooms where equipment mysteriously malfunctioned when certain students tried to use it. Verbal intimidation, property damage, systematic exclusion of students deemed weaker or less important. It was all there. Every casual cruelty, every flex of power, every time I'd made someone's life harder just because I could. Watching it play out from an outside perspective was like seeing a stranger, except that stranger was me, and he was awful. 73 separate incidents, Dean Valtaris said quietly, involving 42 different students across 18 species. And that's just what we've confirmed so far. Vorkoth, you've been running what amounts to a protection racket in our facility for years. I never physically hurt anyone before Dakota, I protested weakly. The rules say no aggressive physical contact. The dean interrupted. You found every loophole, every gray area, every technicality that let you terrorize other students without quite crossing the line into expulsion-worthy offenses. Very clever. Also very much over. He turned to Dakota. Miss Mills, your actions, while justified in the moment, opened an investigation that should have happened years ago. Multiple students have come forward since your incident, finally feeling safe enough to report their experiences. You've done this academy a service, though I doubt that was your intention. Dakota shrugged. I just didn't want my stuff broken. The service part was accidental. I almost laughed at that. Almost. Would have been inappropriate given the circumstances, but the blunt honesty was so typically human it caught me off guard. Here's the situation, Dean Valtaris continued. Varkoth, you're facing potential expulsion. The evidence against you is overwhelming. However, several of the affected students have requested something unusual. They don't want you expelled. They want you reformed. Reformed? I repeated. The word tasted strange. Yes. They believe, and I quote, that learning is supposed to be the point of this place. They've requested that instead of expulsion you undergo an intensive rehabilitation program. You would be assigned a partner from a species you've targeted, and together you would complete a series of challenges designed to build empathy, cooperation, and mutual respect. My hearts were pounding. And if I refuse, then you're expelled immediately, your family is notified, and you return to your homeworld in disgrace. Given Craxian culture, I imagine that won't go well for you. He wasn't wrong. Returning home as a failure wasn't just embarrassing, it was potentially dangerous. Weak Craxians didn't last long in our society. Who would be my partner? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Dean Valtaris looked at Dakota. Miss Mills has volunteered. I turned to stare at her. You volunteered? To work with me? After I destroyed your property and tried to humiliate you? She met my gaze steadily. You're a bully and a jerk, Vorkoth. But you're not stupid. You learned the systems here, found the weaknesses, exploited them efficiently. That takes intelligence. Intelligence can be redirected. Plus, and this is important, I broke your arm. We're even on the physical violence front. Clean slate. You think breaking my arm makes us even? I couldn't believe this. You destroyed my property in front of everyone to humiliate me and establish dominance. I broke your arm in front of everyone to establish that humans don't accept dominance through bullying. Yeah, I think that's pretty even. You got hurt. I got justice. We both learned something. Now we either move forward or you go home. Your choice. Dean Valtaris pulled up another hologram. The program would last 12 weeks. You'd be assigned joint projects in combat simulation, survival training, cultural studies, and ethical philosophy. You'd be required to attend counseling sessions together twice weekly. Your progress would be monitored constantly. Any aggression, any attempt to intimidate or harm Miss Mills, and you're immediately expelled. No appeals, no second chances. I looked at the hologram, then at Dakota, then back at the dean. This was insane. Working with the human who'd humiliated me, who'd literally broken my bone, who represented everything that had gone wrong with my carefully constructed social position. Every instinct I had screamed at me to refuse to take my chances with expulsion to maintain my dignity. But then I remembered that human general from the video, attacking in a different direction. Maybe this was my different direction. I accept. I said. Dakota nodded. Good. Let's be clear though. Dean Valtaris, if he tries anything, and I mean anything aggressive, I'm defending myself. Same as before. Just so we're all on the same page about expectations. Noted. The dean said with what might have been amusement. Though I suspect Mr. Vorkov has learned that particular lesson thoroughly. Haven't you? Yes, sir, I muttered. My arm phantom ached at the memory. Excellent. You'll begin tomorrow. Oh, and one more thing. This program is being documented. If successful, it will become a model for addressing bullying and interspecies conflicts throughout the Coalition Academy system. Your pioneers, in a sense, try not to kill each other. We were dismissed. Dakota and I walked out of the dean's office together, an awkward silence hanging between us. The corridor was busy with students heading to various classes. Several of them stared at us, probably wondering why the human legend and the fallen enforcer were walking side by side. So, Dakota said finally, tomorrow, main training complex, 0800 hours. Don't be late. I'm never late, I said automatically. Good. Neither am I. She started to walk away, then paused and looked back. Hey, Vorkov. This program, it's a chance. Don't waste it being stubborn and stupid. Actually try. You might surprise yourself. Then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd of students, leaving me standing there wondering what I'd just agreed to. That night, lying in my dorm room, I couldn't sleep. My roommate, a quiet Plutonian named Rax who'd always avoided me, actually tried to make conversation. Heard about your new assignment, he said carefully. With a human. Yeah, I said. Should be interesting. She's smart, you know. Dakota. We have quantum mechanics together. She thinks differently than most species, sees patterns we miss. It frustrates some of the professors because she questions everything, but she's usually right when she does. I turned to look at him. You like her? Everyone likes her. She's kind. Helps other students even when it doesn't benefit her. Shares her notes. Explains concepts in different ways until people understand. She's what we all came here hoping to be. I think. Someone who makes things better just by being there. The contrast to what I'd been, what I'd represented, hit hard. I'd made things worse. Actively, deliberately worse for dozens of students over years. And for what? Status? Fear? Some twisted sense of superiority? Rax, I said quietly. Did I do anything to you? He was silent for a long moment. You took my datapad once. First semester, first year. Said you needed it more than I did. I had an assignment. Had to beg the professor for an extension, got marked down for being late. I was too scared to report it. The memory came back. A small Plutonian crystalline body trembling slightly, handing over his pad without resistance. I'd used it for maybe an hour, then left it in the training complex where he eventually found it. I'd forgotten about it entirely by the next to him. It had been a defining moment of his academy experience. I'm sorry, I said. The words felt insufficient, hollow, but they were Are you, Rax asked, or are you sorry you got caught? Honest question deserved an honest answer. Both, maybe. But the sorry for doing it is getting stronger. Does that count for anything? Ask me in 12 weeks, he said. Then surprisingly he added, I hope it works, this program. I hope you actually change, because if you can, maybe others can too. And that would make a lot of students safer. Sleep came eventually, but it was restless, full of dreams where I was simultaneously the enforcer and the victim, seeing my actions from both sides and not liking either perspective. Morning came too quickly. I arrived at the main training complex at 0745, determined not to give Dakota any reason to criticize me on day one. She was already there, stretching, wearing practical training clothes, and that omnipresent bag slung across her back. Early, she observed. Good, let's just get this over with, I said. Wrong attitude already. She finished stretching and faced me fully. This isn't something to get through, Vorkov. It's something to actually do. Participate, engage, learn. Otherwise, we're both wasting time and you're going home anyway. A holographic instructor materialized in the center of the training floor. These were standard for combat simulations, able to create scenarios and opponents without risking actual students. Welcome to day one, the hologram said in a neutral voice. Today's exercise is simple. Survival scenario, hostile environment, limited resources. You must work together to reach the extraction point. Failure to cooperate results in failure of the mission. You have 30 minutes. Begin. The training complex transformed around us. Suddenly we were standing in what looked like a frozen wasteland, wind howling, temperature dropping rapidly. My Craxian biology could handle cold better than most species, but this was extreme even for me. Dakota immediately pulled gear from her bag. Thermal blanket, portable heating unit, emergency rations. Of course she came prepared. Humans and their obsessive preparation for worst-case scenarios. There, she said, pointing to a distant structure barely visible through the blowing snow. That's probably the extraction point. We need to move fast. Exposure at this temperature will overwhelm even your cold resistance eventually. I can handle it, I said automatically. For maybe 20 minutes. Then hypothermia sets in. Your reactions slow. Your judgment gets impaired. And you die. Don't be stupid. Take this. She held out the thermal blanket. Pride made me want to refuse. Common sense, newly awakened by recent experiences, made me take it. We started moving toward the structure, fighting wind with every step. The simulation was brutally realistic, and within minutes I understood why Dakota had insisted on the blanket. The cold was seeping through my scales, making movement painful. Halfway to the structure, the ground gave way beneath us. The simulation had triggered an avalanche. We tumbled down a slope, buried in simulated snow. When I fought my way to the surface, gasping, I couldn't see Dakota anywhere. "Mills!" I shouted. Nothing. Dakota, a muffled response came from my left. She was buried deeper than I was, probably because of her smaller mass. I could leave her reach the extraction point alone, complete the mission solo. The old me would have done exactly that. The new me, the one who was supposedly reforming, started digging. My claws were good for this at least. I tore through the snow, following the sound of her voice. When I finally uncovered her, she was shivering violently, lips turning blue. The heating unit had been lost in the fall. "Can you walk?" I asked. "Gee, give me a second," she managed through chattering teeth. We didn't have a second. The temperature was still dropping, and now we were both compromised. The extraction point was still 100 meters away, uphill through impossible condition. I made a decision. I picked her up, ignoring her surprised protest, wrapped both of us in the thermal blanket as best I could, and started moving. She was lighter than I expected, but in these conditions any extra weight was a challenge. "Put me down," she said. "You can't carry me and make it yourself." "Shut up," I said. "We're doing this together or not at all. That's the point, right? Cooperation." "This is stupid. You'll fail the mission, then we fail together." "But we're not leaving anyone behind." I pushed forward, every step an effort, legs burning, lungs screaming. Dakota had stopped protesting, conserving energy probably. Or maybe she'd passed out from the cold. I didn't look down to check, just focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The structure got closer. 10 meters. 5. 2. I crashed through the entrance and the simulation ended immediately. We were back in the normal training complex, warm and safe. Dakota rolled out of my arms, checking herself over. "I'm okay. Cold, but okay." The holographic instructor reappeared. "Mission failed. You did not reach the extraction point within the time limit. However, your performance showed significant cooperation, strategic thinking, and ethical decision-making. For day one, this is acceptable progress." I collapsed on the floor, exhausted but weirdly satisfied. "We failed." "Yeah," Dakota said, sitting beside me. "But you came back for me. Old Vorkoth wouldn't have done that."
"How do you know?"
"Because old Vorkoth would have seen me as dead weight, a liability. You just proved you see me as a partner. That's progress, Vorkoth. Actual progress." We sat there in silence for a moment, both recovering from the simulation. Other students were filtering in for their own training sessions, staring at us curiously. "Tomorrow's going to be harder, isn't it?" I asked. "Probably. Each session builds on the last. But hey, you survived day one, only 83 more days to go." I groaned. "When you phrase it like that, it sounds impossible." "Humans do impossible stuff all the time," she said, standing and offering me a hand up. "You're partnered with one, so maybe some of it will rub off on you." I took her hand. She pulled. I stood, and we walked out of the training complex together. Students parted around us, whispers following in our wake. The fallen enforcer and the human legend working together. It was weird, unexpected, completely against everything I'd built my academy reputation on. But as we headed to our next assignment, cultural studies in the ethics wing, I realized something surprising. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about status or fear or power. I was thinking about passing the next test, learning the next lesson, proving that maybe, just maybe, people could change. And if a stubborn Craxian bully could learn to see a human as a partner instead of a target, well, That gave me hope that this galaxy might actually figure out how to get along after all. The 12 weeks stretched ahead of us, full of challenges and probably more failures and hopefully some successes. But we'd face them together, not as enemies. Not as bully and victim, but as something new. Partners. Pioneers. Proof that even the worst of us could become better if we actually tried. And that, I was learning, was the most human thing of all. The stubborn,
God
relentless
brought you
belief
here
that
for a
tomorrow
reason.
could be better
If
than
you
today
believe
if we
in
were
the
willing to
power
do
of
the
the
work.
human spirit, hit subscribe. Join the golden age. See you among the stars. Witness this. This is why God gave humans such an unbreakable will. No force in the galaxy can hold us back.